Hello, my friends. David Paskin here, your Torah Tech Guy. And as your Torah Tech Guy, you know that my goal is always to share with you great tech for your great Torah. Welcome to Unmute. Unmute was born out of saying so many times over the past year, please unmute, or you need to unmute. And what I realized is that telling someone to unmute isn't just a technical request. The best Jewish education is when we lift up our students' voices and allow everyone to become a teacher of their Torah. So Unmute, this broadcast strives to amplify the voices of those who are unmuting their students and adding more voices to the Jewish narrative in digital space. So let's get started. My guest today is Rabbi Yechiel Hoffman. Rabbi Hoffman is the U.S. Director of Jewish Interactive, and he's enriched the Jewish journeys of children and adults in Jewish day schools, community organizations, and synagogues after an early career in the entertainment industry. I want to ask you about that. As a community activist, he serves as a rabbinic advisor, activist and outreach expert for the issues related to LGBTQIA+ inclusion, women's issues, innovation, and education. Rabbi Hoffman received the prestigious Pomegranate Prize from the Covenant Foundation and earned a doctorate in education from Northeastern University. He is the co-founder of JED Lab, which so many of us appreciate on Facebook. If you have questions, please unmute yourself by adding your questions to the chat in either Facebook or YouTube, wherever you're watching. We'll get to as many as we possibly can. Rabbi Hoffman, it is so good to see you and to meet you.
Rabbi David, you as well. It's great to be here with you, to be able to talk about all the things about Jewish education that I think inspire us, but specifically to, like the concept of this podcast, that like what we're really trying to do is to erase the barriers that prevent people from having a voice or having the tools or having even the will to make Jewish education something they own as their own birthright and as something that they have the power to give to others.
Wow. I have so many questions for you. Before we get to that, I'm fascinated. The entertainment work, what was that about?
I mean, I went to film school in college. I sat there with my yeshiva in high school and writing screenplays, and that was going to be my way of bringing my Torah to the world. And I went to pursue that dream. And it was when working in the entertainment industry and really recognizing what it meant to represent myself as a Jew, and both how hard that was, but also how needed it was to bring Jewish values, to bring Jewish ethics, to bring a sense of what Jewish storytelling was. I realized that this is something I could do not just by making movies, and that Jewish education was going to be another way for me to do it. Now, it wasn't that simple of a transition, and there was definitely some grieving and mourning involved anytime you walk away from your initial dream. But after now, I think it's 17 years of working in Jewish education, I've come to realize how much I gained from those years working in the entertainment industry and how much they taught me about what it means to be a creative professional, how much it means to be a collaborator, and how much it means to give people voice.
Were you always wanting to be behind the screen, or were you ever as a playwright, or or were you ever front of screen type of person?
I was always a behind the camera kind of person. Okay. I still feel like in general I'm a behind the camera person. They used to joke when I worked in a synagogue for 6 years here in Los Angeles that I was much more comfortable standing in the back of the room, shaking people's hands and making sure everything happened, than being in the front of the room on the stage. I don't know if it's partially like a control thing. Like I like to be behind the camera. I want to see how all the pieces work, but it's also my obsession with systems. And I love how to bring things together and the interconnection. So for filmmaking, that was how do I bring together the camera and the sound and the editing, and how do I get out of actors to bring out their best performance. And I think in many ways that translates into Jewish education, where there's not just one thing that makes a great Jewish educator or a great Jewish educational experience. It's many things. And the joy I get is how do you bring all those things together to serve the ultimate purpose, which is, for us, it's the learner. And
Yeah.
in film, it was the viewer. And in other mediums, it's the person using. And how do you have humility towards your interest as a creator to realize that your creation is really for someone else and their needs?
The connection between film being a viewer and education and being a learner is fascinating for me, because one of the things that certainly in digital space that we find is that digital media is meant to be a passive experience for the most part. We have muscle memory from sitting on the couch and watching Netflix or TV or whatever it is, and yet education at its best is probably the antithesis of that. It's active, it's engaged. I'd love to hear a little bit about how we fight against the passivity that comes with digital encounters. But I also want to make sure that we get to Jewish Interactive, and what are the systems that you talked about systems. What are the systems that Jewish Interactive has been using long before the pandemic? I mean, you all have been around for years doing this kind of work. So what is Jewish Interactive all about, and how does it seek to fulfill that mission that you spoke about?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll connect it in two ways. Like, I want to just think about the notion that film is just a passive medium. And one of the things I believe, as someone who is still like a film fanatic and still obsessed with film, I have my own podcast on movies that I do with my friend Jody Berman, is that we always say, like, even though the viewing experience is passive, what you're really trying to create is this conversation that comes out of the viewing experience. And I think the same thing was always there, even in the most passive forms of Torah or Jewish learning, that even though we might perceive it as passive, what we're really trying to generate is this conversation that occurs after that transmission. Um, but I think what really struck me in my own development as a Jewish educator is realizing that technology that we have, particularly here in the 21st century, and I would say, I mean that both in terms of hardware and software, but I think also in our pedagogic evolution, is we've started to realize that we don't have to be limited to a passive experience in the learning experience itself, and then just say, oh, afterwards they'll take it to the next level. Um, and so with Jewish Interactive, when I came on board almost 2 years ago, what I really was hoping for is how can we harness the amazing technology that's already available in for much of secular education and start to say, how do we elevate the experience of Jewish education in a few ways? One is for the teacher themselves, who's trying to find a way to connect with their students, to be relevant, to maximize the level of individualization or personalization. How can we give them tools to do that? And then on the second level, as a student, how can we make them more in charge of their learning? How can we give them choice and access so that they can be able to determine, both in terms of the content they're learning, but also understanding how effectively they're gaining new knowledge, that technology allows us to do by introducing them both to a large library of content, but also be able to do it in a gamified way that gets them to understand, oh, here's how I'm improving. Here's where I still need help. And the third level that's really important is parents. I've always felt that parents have been left out of the Jewish educational enterprise. They've been mostly treated as consumers. And I've always believed that we need to find more ways to give choice to parents. And if we look at the way technology over the last 20 years has evolved, it's all about giving more power to the individual consumer. And I wanted parents to feel like they were more partners in the process of understanding and choosing what their kids were engaging with. That did mean that we're opening up things to new structures, that it's not going to be just about like, oh, I put my kid in a space for a certain period of time, but maybe there's other ways to get them to think about, what is Jewish learning I wanted to have happen in my house? Is it family oriented and not just individually oriented? Is it around certain topics? Is it happening at certain points in time? I think technology opens that. It's not the panacea. It's not the perfect pill, because I think technology has limitations, as we've seen in the past year. But like with anything, we need more experimentation. We need more people jumping in and being creative with it for us to understand how to use it best.
I felt for a while that we Jews were so good at shooting ourselves in the foot, because in order to support our synagogues and our communities, we created these Hebrew schools, these religious schools, which sort of lead up to bar bat mitzvah. And then we said, well, you have to enroll your children in order to become bar bat mitzvah, which trained parents in this sort of this drive-through Judaism, right? This drop-off Judaism. You don't have to be responsible for your children's Jewish education. Leave that up to us. That's our job. And now we're at a place where we're trying to undo that. We're trying to say we are co-creators with you of your child's Jewish education, and you are vital to that experience. Not just, to me at least, it's more than you need to partner with us to make sure that your child logs in and does this. It's really about co-ownership. So we want the students to own their learning. We also want the parents to own some learning, their family's learning.
Yeah, and I think the hard part is we also haven't given a space for parents in that stage of life in which they're learning that a lot of their choices are not going to be for themselves, but going to be for other people, which is often what you see in with parents who have kids 0 to 6, is we go too far in the other direction. We don't give them a space to learn and to be engaging and learning about how to be adults in that space.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because, I've done a lot of work now with moving traditions around the B'nai Mitzvah experience, thinking about the parents in the process, not just in the transaction or in the expectation. And one of the things I noticed is that some of them come to us and their kids turning 12, and it's been 12 years since they ever thought about learning for themselves. And one of the reasons they end up placing these either unrealistic expectations, or I would even say low expectations on their kids, is because they haven't found any expectations for themselves within Judaism. And it's not just about modeling. It's about realizing that the best of Jewish learning has to offer is about a journey in life. It's not about a culmination in experience.
Yeah.
And part of the challenge, I think, of learning even in the digital space is this problem, where a lot of people see it as I accumulated some piece of knowledge that I'm able to gather from a digital space, but where's the coaching? Where's the chavruta that's taking place between them and the material? So I really feel like what I would love to see synagogues, and for that matter, even day schools and camps, is start to consider the relationship they have with content that they're transmitting to people, and the way that we support them in intersecting that within their lives. I think that's a really pivotal part, and why technology, or I would say everything about our digital lives is important, is because that's where people live now.
Yeah.
And the last year proved it. Last year wasn't an anomaly. Last year was just an amplification of what already existed. From shopping for groceries to, going to synagogue on Zoom, it already existed. It was just a question of how far are people willing to take it when they had to. Now we have the question of, okay, how can we really think this through in terms of what this means through a Jewish lens, through an educational lens, and I would say even for that matter through a lifelong learning perspective.
But, another thing that last year did, which you mentioned earlier, is you talked about the sort of the democratization, that, how everyone truly can be an owner or a creator of their own path. And I think that this past year also not only proved that, but amplified it, as you said. People could daven wherever they wanted. People could take classes wherever they wanted. I mean, we could do that before too, but none of us realized it, I guess. And for me, one of the most powerful realizations or celebrations, I guess I should say, is that I don't have to limit my offerings to just the teachers or the professionals that live in my area, that I can truly find the best people from anywhere, the best programs from anywhere, and bring them in. And, Jewish Interactive is sort of exactly that. I mean, you don't live near me. In fact, I love the fact that the clock behind you, every time I look at it, I think that I'm 3 hours early to this program. I mean, this is...
You should see my London and Israel clocks too,
Right. Jewish Interactive has already for years... Hi, Wesley, by the way. Wesley Curry is here. He's saying hello. Jewish Interactive has for years tried to teach people you don't need to go this alone. And even though we're not local, we can help. That we are better together. We can share resources. We can work together. We can learn from one another. For those who don't know, what is Jewish Interactive? I mean, on a sort of a pshat level.
Yeah. So just Jewish Interactive is an organization set up to really try to, as you said, create access for all Jews, regardless of geography, background, denominations, by creating Jewish learning tools. Our primary tool is a platform that you can access thousands and thousands of learning games across all different topics, from Hebrew to Jewish values to holidays to Israel. And then you have the opportunity to also use those materials if you're a teacher within a classroom, or if you're just a kid sitting at home and wanting to learn more about an upcoming holiday. We've also built out some other tools as well that complement these experiences and maybe offer a very specific kind of encounter. But predominantly, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to say that, like, content right now can be accessed anywhere. And if we can put it into a form that's engaging for a student, that's useful for an educator, we're more likely to get them to think about, how do I get people to engage outside of the 1 hour I might have access to them? I think also one of the things we're wanting to think about, which is, I think, really important to your point about democratization of Jewish education, is we are breaking down the boundaries between local and regional and global. And as you said, you, Rabbi David, who might be based in one region, now can reach many other people. It's not because you didn't have the tools to be able to broadcast yourself in the past. It's because now people are getting used to the idea that I can build relationships way beyond what I could have imagined in previous years. And I just want to go back to, like, that's one of the basic tenets of Jewish Interactive, is that what we're also trying to do is cross boundaries between people of different denominations, people of different geographies, so that they can understand what is the thing that excites you about Jewish education. How can I learn about your customs? How can I learn about the difference in your approach to studying Torah? Because I think that makes us have access to other ways to approach things than oftentimes we do from just the one locality that we live in, the one rabbi or teacher that we get exposed to. And I was also just thinking about, like, you mentioned I'm the co-founder of JedLab with Ken Gordon, and I worked very closely with quite a few of the moderators over the years who really helped us, primarily Sarah Shapiro-Plevin, who was one of the people who really stepped up to work with Ken and I. And one of the tenets that we had for that is that we saw the teachers were very curious and also had big problems to solve, but they had nobody to solve them with. And technology in all these forms, what it does is it doesn't solve the problem for us. It just solves the problem that gets us to the problem solving stage, which is, how do we find the people that have the skills, the tenacity, and the will to work together to create this better vision that we have, even if we can't do it together. I want to empower parents to be part of that conversation. 10 years ago, when we started JedLab, it was about, how do we just get educators to do that?
Yeah.
And I think to a good degree we've succeeded. But what we still want to do is say that every Jewish parent deserves to be a part of that conversation too. That for too long, it's kind of been, they have to accept whatever their local rabbi is willing to offer them. And we know there's too many opt-outs. And I would even say, Rabbi David, in the past year, yes, it's amazing to see how many families were engaged even a higher level in distance learning through their religious schools, or participated in family programming through their synagogues, or engaged in a PJ library program that was online. But we also know many who used the pandemic as an opt-out, and they had cover for it. And they weren't opting out because of the pandemic. They were opting out because they were always on the fence to opting out. It's now they had a way to rationalize their own guilt that was driving them in. I want to create guilt-free Jewish education. Let's make it as easy and accessible as possible for people to access something. And with Jewish Interactive, that's one way to do that, by saying we can put it on your iPad, on your computer, in your home, at your time, and you can do this at your own discretion. The challenge is, many parents don't know where to start. They don't have master's degrees in Jewish education. They're not rabbis. So they feel like, how would I know what my kid should learn? But the truth is, parents do know. You just have to, we have to find a way to talk with them, to coach them. And I think PJ Library actually is one of the more successful organizations and building like the local connectors that help people do that who don't have that access to figure out what they need. And there's great data coming from them about what they want. And I think we have to consider, what does that look like in the next 5 years? How do we really, I know we're all enjoying like the data we got from the Pew study, but I think we need to start gathering some more data. And those of us working in the digital space have the opportunity to gather that data maybe more effectively than those working just in more analog environments.
Yeah. I love the guilt-free education piece. That's so beautiful. So since you've been doing this pre-pandemic, what has had to change over, or not maybe not had to, but how has Jewish Interactive shifted or changed or adapted over the past year in ways that maybe you didn't expect it to?
Yeah, I think the biggest way we've had to change is that originally we were creating complementary materials. Like, so if you wanted to learn about Shabbat, we had a game for Shabbat. If you wanted to teach about Hebrew, we had games for Hebrew. And we were expecting that people kind of knew what they wanted. They had determined their path. What we saw happen during the pandemic is how many people, whether they were educators or parents, really didn't have their path, and we're kind of expecting us to create like a curricular path for them. And so one of the things we've had to really work on in the past year is to kind of really pivot quickly to provide ways to generate learning journeys for people. We were kind of assuming we could provide the content material in a highly sophisticated, fun, engaging way, and that would fit into what other people's plans were. And we realized how many people are looking to us to create their plan for them. And even as we're coming out of the pandemic and entering into this new phase this coming year, we're still getting a lot of people interested in us doing that for them. So we're actually preparing to launch a whole new platform that we were developing before the pandemic. And we'll have many features that will enhance the offerings that we already have available. But one of the big pieces of this is going to be, and what we learned through the pandemic, is that people really want there to be some way to generate a learning journey for them. And what we're hoping to do is through technology is that learning journey will have a way of being adaptable to the person as their progress goes, so that as their interests change, it will shift their learning journey as well. Because we recognize nobody's on a linear trajectory. We see as students, it's much more spiraled and sometimes even a little messy. And we want to be able to accommodate for that. And in some ways, we will work with teachers to build that. In some ways, we're going to have to do it where it's going to be a little more automated. Because that's what parents want. And
that adaptability. Sorry, that adaptability, I think, is so key. I was on a call last night. It's a hybrid ministries forum that I participate in sometimes, and we were talking about the hesitancy around change and adaptation, and that especially synagogues are sort of looking for the end game now, right? What is the technology that I have to have for when I really know how to do this, instead of what's the technology that I need right now? And one of the panelists was saying that he comes from the sports world, and he was saying that we need to think about this process, any process really, the way a sports team does, right? A sports team, they win the championship, they win the Super Bowl, they win whatever, and they celebrate for a day, and then they start playing a new game, and they start all over again. There is no finished, there is no perfect model, because each individual themselves is also learning and growing and changing. It's why we read the Torah, right? Every single year, the same exact thing. The Torah never changes, but I do every single time. So having a system like Jewish Interactive that is adaptable, that can grow with people, is really profound. How does Jewish Interactive do that now? I mean, what are the mechanisms by which it's able to be sort of responsive to a person's growth?
I mean, right now, mostly how we do that is by working in training educators and parents how to use our technology in that way. The technology itself is not programmed to deliver that at the moment. We're hoping that's something we're building towards. But because of the way that our content library is built, it allows parents and teachers with the right training to be able to do that. I also just want to say to your sports metaphors, I agree with you that we always have to be in a mindset where both not getting satisfied, but also knowing there's no end. Like this is
Right.
cyclical. Like the Torah we read every year, we're gonna revisit this, and you can't revisit it in the same way you revisited it last year. You have to always think about what's going to be your new approach. What are your new goals? I'm a baseball fan. I don't know if you are, um, but I'll say like if you're following baseball this year, one of the big stories is the fact is that um, there was a lot of concern that there was not enough offense and that the pitchers were doing something to the baseball that was making it extremely difficult for hitters to hit at a level that was expected of them. And so Major League Baseball has decided now they're going to crack down on pitchers using any kind of substance that would affect how they would throw the ball in such a way. And as soon as they started cracking down a little bit, the offense started improving. And the reason I bring this up is I think there's sometimes a tendency in Jewish education to fix the most recent problem you have. And the truth is, those pitchers were doing things to the ball because the hitters had found an advantage by hitting in a certain way. And the reason that the hitters started using the advantage they had and developing a new way to hit is because the fielders started moving around the field in a way to really prevent it and make it difficult for the hitters. And rather than looking at what are the systems and each intervention is now causing another reaction, we react to the most recent things. So you mentioned before, Rabbi David, the bar mitzvah, which I think is oftentimes looked at as both one of the greatest successes of American Judaism and its greatest failures. It's a success because what other thing has drawn more people to bring their families into synagogue life than the bar mitzvah? What other things has become such a cornerstone moment for Jewish people in their lives? And that's powerful and important, and we should not forget how great that is. And then at the same time, we also say the bar mitzvah, because of the way it's been designed, has also generated really negative systems that promote a certain approach to Jewish education and learning during elementary school years, and then promotes a drop-off of engagement in the teen years. So I think all of these things, rather than looking at the thing itself, we have to draw back and go step by step backwards and also say, what are the things that led to this? Why did we get to this point? And what can we do from a systematic perspective to not just like cut off everything at the knees and saying, okay, no more bar mitzvahs, but maybe think things like, hey, maybe the bar mitzvah has to shift to being at a later state to match up with where American culture is in terms of the graduation from high school. Like maybe we have to start thinking about,
That's pretty
what
radical.
does it mean? I don't know if it's so radical. We've been thinking about this for years in terms of shifting what coming of age means and what developing. I'm a personal believer that we do need something in the Jewish world. Maybe not something as extravagant as the bar mitzvah enterprise, but something that does mark the entrance into adolescence. I think that is extremely valuable.
Is that like confirmation? I mean, is that...
So, but confirmation was a funny thing we borrowed from the non-Jewish world, right, because we wanted our kids to engage in ways that the church did so that they would be able to say, oh, yeah, you did something in parallel. So I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think borrowing at all is a bad thing. But I also think like we look at what we're doing now and how is it serving our ultimate purposes. And I think for many years of American Judaism, it wasn't about serving our ultimate purposes. It was about how do we engage in Judaism in a way that's going to make us acceptable in the assimilation narrative. And now we're seeing a pullback from that in all the denominations, even in the spaces outside the denominations, where it's like, okay, tribalism is back. And how do we get people to feel connected to Judaism? So I'm very curious what we're going to learn from the past year about the way that the digital enterprise has informed how people are thinking of bar mitzvah. I got to tell you, I'm a big fan of getting kids off the bima. And I love the fact that in this past year, many families did things digitally, which wasn't about the kid being on a bima in front of 500 people they didn't know.
I've never understood. I've never understood why the value in a family who never goes to shul marking this momentous occasion in shul, like on the bima, in tefillah. I had a student, God, many years ago, who was actually, she had some learning things and she was not able to stand in front of a group and speak, but she wrote vociferously. She loved writing. She wrote books and books and books and books and books. So what we did is, instead of her doing the tefillah thing, doing all that, she wrote a book about a character becoming bat mitzvah. And she wrote about this character writing her Devar Torah. And so that's how she learned about the Parsha. And then we had her celebration in a Barnes & Noble. We published her book, self-published her book. She gave that out to guests and it was the most meaningful experience because this family, aside from her own, I don't want to call them limitations, but her own maybe perceived limitations. This family, prayer was not something that was intimately meaningful for them. Being on the bima, being in the sanctuary, but writing was, and that became a really powerful Jewish vehicle for her to mark this moment in her life.
I think there's two things that are critical to what you just said. One is let us just openly state that the Jewish education system struggles with how to think about kids who don't fit in the box. And that can be because of special needs, that can be because of lots of reasons. And we really need to think about, like, what is even the box? Like, whose box is this that says, here's the type of experience that fits the type of student? I think that we're seeing that less and less and less and less. I think one thing that you're talking about on a second level is this difference between the performative and the authentic. And I think we have been invested in the performative. I think it's a cultural thing that came out of the baby boomer generation, where performative kind of Judaism was very much valued. But we're seeing, if you look at kids, and I would even say teens and college kids are coming out through Gen Z, they will really shut down the performative and claim the authentic. And they're doing it at a younger and younger age. And you're seeing kids push back. And they still want the accolades, and of course they still want the party and the social thing, but what they really want is a space to be authentic, and they oftentimes will put up with our adult demands on them being performative, and we have to ask ourselves, who's that good for? Right. So I love your story. The Barnes & Noble story is actually fantastic because it was putting this child into a space where they actually knew that what they were doing was valid and honored, right? That's what Barnes & Noble does really well. But I also think, like my own child, I'm a rabbi. I was working in a synagogue. Part of my job was supporting families. We made the decision for my daughter that we were not going to do a synagogue-based experience. We did it actually. We rented space at an Hillel, and like you were talking about, asking my child to write a Dvar Torah and read it in front of everybody was just so not authentic to who she was. So instead, she learned and studied about Rosh Chodesh, because we were doing actually Rosh Chodesh bar bat mitzvah, and then she sat down with a friend of ours who's an amazing musician and songwriter, and because she's really into music and she loves musicals, and they wrote a song together about Rosh Chodesh, and then she performed it at the bat mitzvah and shared the lyrics and talked about the lyrics. Of course, as a parent, I was proud of her. It was so great to see her, like, to your metaphor, being unmuted. Yeah. And one of the things that she talked to me about in the 2 years since, especially because it's been during COVID, she's saying she never is going to tell me how much she appreciated that we gave her that opportunity because she's an adolescent, but she will tell me that she had her voice heard. And what I hope we can do is make a B'nai Mitzvah experience, mitzvah experience, wherever and whenever it takes place, where a child comes out to saying their voice was heard. Yeah. And that they felt it true to themselves, because that to me is the means to the end. The B'nai Mitzvah experience is about teaching a kid, as you're entering adolescence, you have a voice in the Jewish world. You are going to be necessary, you're going to matter, you're responsible. But if they don't feel, especially this generation, if they don't feel that their voice actually mattered, they're just going to recede. Right. And I'm so hopeful for this generation to teach us that. I think we've been learning that already for the last 10, 15 years, seeing that, but this generation in particular they're on, and especially because they survived COVID, the things they're going to teach us now because of what they've learned in the past year and what they're going to demand and not just put up with, I think we're going to see some radical change in the next 5 years.
Yeah,
This would be
it
awesome.
is. It is going to take some demanding. Debbie is active in the chat. Hi, Debbie. It's good to have you here. And she was saying before that it's easiest to follow a formula, and that people are already reverting to the before. I'm actually working on a webinar, a class that I want to teach called "Don't Go Back to Normal, Please." I just had a conversation today with a few folks in New York. Normal kind of stinks. It kind of sunk. Like, we weren't growing. We didn't have increased participation. We didn't have increased engagement. We weren't having more and more bar bat mitzvahs that were meaningful. We can do better. And it is going to take, I think, as you said, some demanding from a new generation and from brave educators like yourself. It is easier to follow a formula.
But David,
But
I
these,
just want and
yeah.
Debbie is a close and good colleague. She works for another organization like ours, Shalom Learning, um, and
Who I
we
had
work constantly.
on,
And we're
yeah, I've, yes, I had Shalom Learning on a couple weeks ago, I think.
So, and Debbie and I have talked about this, and I just want to give her a shout out because she actually had a child during the pandemic who had a bnei mitzvah, and one of the things that she said to me when we were talking about this like normal thing is just this normal is going to happen. It's a comfort thing. I don't want to say good or bad. There's a rubber band period we're in. The kids will lead us. The parents right now are more interested in going back to the thing that was familiar and comfortable with them. The kids are going to start demanding new experiences. So I say this for religious school administrators, I say this for camps, I say this for day schools, I say this for rabbis. Like, start listening to the kids. They're going to tell you what they're going to want their Jewish experiences to look like. And the last year, they're very attuned to what worked and what didn't. It might take 6 months to a year to get that feedback to actually reach, or but if we can learn from you, Rabbi David, in this message of unmuting, I would really charge it's absolutely important to unmute the Jewish educators. It's even more important to unmute these kids who have been through this experience this past year. And yes, we have to help them socially, emotionally, come out of this and deal with the trauma of the past year, just like all of us adults need to acknowledge and deal with that. But are going to give us so much learning if we're willing to listen about what's going to work for them. And what I really don't want is to wait 5 or 6 years so these kids end up in college and then us to get shocked because they're not behaving the way that we expect them to behave. This group, like we've seen any time there's a momentous experience in for a generation, this is going to be a defining moment for them. And I think their relationship to digital technology is going to be defining, their relationship to how they socialize and interact. But I think it's also going to be an attitudinal one, not just a behavioral one. And
And
I'm
and
really excited to see that.
And by the way, for those people who are afraid that, digital learning or digital davening, or, that digital is going to take over the physical, the on-site experiences, that's not what I'm hearing from my students. A lot of my students are eager to come back on site and be in the same physical space together. So I don't think we need to be afraid of the feedback and the guidance and the leadership that they're going to provide. I think we need to trust that they know better than we do what is going to work for them, what's going to move them, what's going to inspire them. Can you maybe tell us? I want to be conscious and of your time. I'm curious, what is something that you at Jewish Interactive have learned this past year that you want to make sure you hold on to, right? Like, this is something that maybe was unanticipated. It could be a tool, or just a pedagogic lesson. What's something that you really want to hold on to as we move forward?
I think just how important it is to be responsive to the people you're trying to serve. I think it's very easy, like you said, to like have in your head the idea of like, okay, there's an X way to solve Y problem. And what we learned from the last year is how little we really knew how to solve the problem because it was just so different and new. And the best way to do it was to be always listening and responsive and empathetic to the people we were serving. And I think that's one thing that's really informing how we move forward and thinking about who is the people we're trying to serve? What do they really need? And we're always in a dilemma. We're like, do they even know? But I like to lean into like, they might not know what they want, but they know what they feel.
Yeah.
And if we can be listening and paying attention to that, I think we can build the best new methods, tools, approaches to meet those needs.
There's an art to doing a Google search. I think that most people are she'enu yodea lishol, right? They don't know how to ask a question, or they don't know the right way to ask a question. And if you spend a little time learning how to ask questions in Google, it makes all the difference in your search results. And so what I'm taking away from what you just said is that part of our job as educators is to help people learn how to ask the right questions. Because you're right, I think they do often feel like they don't know what they want. But if we can help them translate those feelings, those yearnings into questions, into inquiries, into discovery, I mean, boy, talk about a powerful opportunity we have.
And I would just say, for people like you and I think our responsibility is to teach other Jewish educational leaders how to do that work. Like, to not just jump in saying you have the solution, or that you know exactly what you're going to deliver, but rather to learn the patience to ask those questions. And I think that's power. I just want to do a little shout out, because I think this week's Parsha is actually really appropriate for the unmute message and the notion of like giving people voice and like making sure they feel heard. And how that can seem radical at first and revolutionary, and then it becomes our standard. And I think that's one of the things we have to do in unmuting, is first thinking about who can we give voice to that has not been heard, because there are so many people in the community. And second is how to give them the tools so when they're unmuted, that they don't think they have to shout because someone's going to cut them off.
Wow.
But rather saying, let's start with the questions we all have together. And we'll succeed a lot more in the next 6 months if we're not rushing out with like, oh my God, nobody wants to be on Zoom, but rather asking the questions about like, okay, what's the best way we can do learning in this new reality where people's behaviors and attitudes and what they believe in has shifted.
Wow. Where can people find you? If they want to learn more about your work, about Jewish Interactive, where should they go?
So they can find the work of Jewish Interactive on www.jewishinteractive.org. You can see all about the work we do, the different products we have, the ways that we provide professional development for teachers. If you're a teacher, you can sign up. We have a bunch of actually great offerings this coming August that we're giving to teachers. If you want to find me, you can reach me at Yechiel at jewishinteractive.org, or you can find me on Twitter at Hoffman. I'm also on Instagram. You can find me. You can find my podcast at 2 Movie Jews, or Two Movie Jews.
That's nice.
2 Movie Jews, and we just talk about movies and we throw in a Jewish perspective.
Is that two, the number two, or spelled out two?
The number two Movie Jews. You can find on Spotify podcast, or on iTunes podcast, or Apple Podcast, whatever they're calling it now, Stitcher, any place. I think it's really important. I just want to say, because I really believe in what you're doing, Rabbi David, in terms of modeling for educators and find different ways to share your Torah. Yeah. And I don't just mean that because, yes, you obviously have great Torah to share, but in every new place that you share your Torah with a new audience, it's really just an opportunity for you to find out new questions and to gain new insights and to get new feedback. And we have the technology now to enable people to do that. Take advantage of that. I love that I get to do that on Twitter, on Instagram, through a podcast. It doesn't have to be because you're just trying to promote yourself. It really is, if you're somebody like Rabbi David, it's just because you're curious and you want more ways to find and connect to people. And I just say, learn. That's another great message we have right now. Don't wait for somebody to unmute you. Unmute yourself. Get out there. Make it happen.
Just do it. I can't tell. I mean, in the beginning, I kind of cared if people were watching these. Now I don't, because it's all about me. I learned so much from you and from everyone who comes on. It's amazing. I'm so grateful for your time, Rabbi Hoffman. It's fantastic.
It's been such a pleasure. Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. So everyone, please do go visit JewishInteractive.org. Check out the Two Movie Jews. Check that out. And while you're online, do me a favor, visit TorahTechGuy.com as we listen to the trash machine in the trash truck in the back, I think. And follow me on Facebook and YouTube. I have some great courses that I'm offering. Everything's free. It's all just here to help you. So it was really wonderful seeing you. Next week, we have our last unmute of this season. I'm going to be away for a couple weeks in July, so we're going to do one more, which is going to be fantastic, and with Evelyn Goldfinger from Torah-tron. It's going to be really, really wonderful. So I hope you'll join me for that. Until then, have the most wonderful Shabbos. Rabbi Hoffman, Shabbat Shalom. Bye, everyone.